In this video, I'm going to be showing you how to build a habit tracker in Notion that also has a streak tracker. Now, the only way to get this to work is by using Notion's formula magic. Now, the formulas do look complex, but don't worry, I'll be breaking them all down into easy to understand steps. So here is the habit tracker that I'm going to be showing you how to build today. So up here we have our streaks. So as you can see, each of these cards represents one of our habits. And here is the current streak. So that is how many days in a row that I've completed this habit. I have another little section here which shows my habits for today. So I'll simply check off the box once I've completed the habit today. So if I just uncheck this one, as you can see, my streak has now been broken for this habit, but once I check it, it will then pick up and update my streak. I've also got this on a calendar view because I know a lot of people like seeing their habit trackers on a calendar. Let me just make this full width so you can see it a little bit better. So here are the habits on the calendar. So as you can see, each habit will appear as a card on the day in the calendar, and you can simply just check them off here and it will then count your current streak. So that is what I'm going to be showing you how to build today. So in the rest of this video, I'm going to be breaking down how to set up a habit tracker with these streaks in easy to understand steps. So I've just set up a brand new blank page. I've just labeled this habit tracker with streaks and just given it an icon and a cover photo. So the first thing that we're going to do is input a brand new database so that we can add in our habits. So I'm going to type in /database and select this database inline option. Now this one is going to be where we list our habits. So I'm just going to name it habits. And I'm just going to start with drink water as my habit. I'm also just going to delete these two rows here, and we're also going to delete this tags property here because we don't need it. So this is what we currently have. So feel free to list other habits here that you want to track, but for the sake of this example, I'm just going to start with drink water. Then just underneath, we're going to add another database, which is actually going to be the habit tracker where we check off the habits each day. So I'm going to type in /database, select database inline, and this one I'm going to name habit tracker. And we're also just going to delete the tags property on this one as well. Now on our habit tracker, you're going to add an entry for each habit for each day that you want to track it. So I'm going to start by adding in my first habit, which is drink water. And I'm just going to make that a bit smaller. I also want to add a date property so that I can select which date this habit is for. So if I click on here and type in date, we're just going to select the date property. And I'm just going to label this one as a few days ago. Let's go with March 23rd. I then want to be able to check off if I've completed this habit. So did I drink water on March 23rd? So I want a checkbox property so that I can check that off once it's completed. So we're going to click on the plus symbol, just type in checkbox, and let's just name this one done. And again, I'm just going to make that a bit smaller. So this works as you can imagine. So if on the March 23rd I did drink the water, I can simply check that off as complete. Now I then need an entry for the following day for the same habit. So in this one, I'm just going to also write drink water, and I'm going to label this one as the following day, March 24th, and let's just add another one. Now don't worry, you won't have to do this every single day. Later on in the video, I'm going to be showing you how to automate this so you don't actually have to physically type each habit out every single day. But this is obviously where I'm going to check off if I've completed the habit that day. Now I need to relate these habit entries here to this habit here. So this is where we're going to list each individual habit, but these are the actual individual entries for each day where I can check off if that habit was complete. So I actually want to relate these two together so that I know that these entries relate to this habit, because as you can imagine, I might have several different habits, so I might have several different entries for each day for different habits. So to connect these two databases together, we're going to use a relation property. So I'm going to click on the plus symbol up here and just type in relation and select this one. It's firstly going to ask me which database I want to relate to. So we're currently on the habits database, so I want to relate to our habit tracker. So I'm going to select that one. Now you can leave everything the same apart from this one. I do want to toggle it on so that this also shows on our habit tracker below, and I'm going to click add relation. So now as you can see, a new column has appeared on each of our databases. So if I click on the box here next to our first drink water entry, I can select which habit this relates to from up here, this database. So obviously this one we're going to select drink water, and I'm just going to drag that down for all three of them. And once I've done that, as you can see, these little drink water entries are now appearing up here next to our drink water. So essentially what we've done here is we're just relating each of our entries to the overall habit up here in our habit streak tracker database. So just before we jump back into the tutorial, I just want to mention that my new Second Brain template is now available on my store. It's a super advanced all-in-one productivity system. I'll leave a link in the description box below if you're interested. So that's all, back to the tutorial. table. So I've just added a couple more entries here. Now I will be showing you how we can turn this into a calendar view later, but for now we're just going to leave it in this table. Now for the example, I'm just going to uncheck these checkboxes and just leave the final 2 checkboxes checked. So if we think of our streak tracker here, this should show a streak of 2 because the final 2 checkboxes here are checked. Now these checkboxes here contain the data that we need to work out our streak. So we actually want to pull this data through up here into our habits database. And in the past I would have used a rollup to do that, but recently Notion updated their formula language and you can actually do it with formulas now. So I don't need a rollup property. I can simply grab the data from this database in this one using a formula. So let's start by adding a new formula onto our habits database. So I'm just going to click the plus symbol, type in formula, and I'm going to call this one checkboxes because what I'm actually going to do with this formula is I'm simply just going to grab the checkboxes from the habit tracker and pull them into this database. So that's why I'm naming it checkboxes. We're then going to click on formula edit, and this is where we can actually type in our formula. Now the first thing we need to do is access the data in our habit tracker database below. Now if you look here in the sidebar, you'll see all of the properties in our habits database, and we did add that relation to our habit tracker database, as you can see here. So if I click on that, it's now going to grab that relation, which is going to allow me to access the data within the habit tracker. Next you want to type in .map and open a parentheses. Now the map function is going to be used to actually access the data within the habit tracker, and as you can see here, 2 variables show up. Now current is the one we're going to select because as you can see here, it returns the value of the current item in the list function. So essentially just means it's going to return whatever is currently in our habit tracker. So I'm going to select current. You're going to type a dot, and as you can see now, it's actually bringing up a different set of properties in our sidebar. Now these properties are actually the properties in our habit tracker, but remember this formula property that we're working with is in our habits database. So as you can see, by using this map function and typing in current is allowing us to actually access the properties in our habit tracker. And as I said, we actually need our done checkbox properties within this tracker because that's what we're actually going to be using to measure our streak. So I'm going to select done, and that's going to pull through these checkbox properties. And we're simply just going to close off our parentheses. So this is the formula, so I'm just going to click done. And as you can see in this checkbox formula, it is simply just pulling through the checkboxes from the habit tracker database. So now we have the checkboxes next to our drink water habit, and I can see the streak visually. So the next thing that we need to do is actually work out how many consecutive checkboxes are checked. So we don't want to see the number of checked checkboxes in total. So for example, if these ones were checked as well, as you can see, there are 4 checkboxes checked, but I don't have a streak of 4 because there is an unchecked checkbox here in the middle, which broke the streak. So I actually only now have a streak of 2 despite these checkboxes being checked. So we don't want to work out the number of checked checkboxes in total, but how many are checked in a row at the end without a broken streak. Now it is a little bit complex, but I'm going to try my best to break it down into simple terms. So what we're going to do is start by adding another formula property, which is where we're going to develop this streak formula. So we're going to click here on the plus symbol, type in formula, and this one I'm going to call streak. And I can click on the formula edit button here to bring up our formula. Now, as you can see, Notion currently displays checkboxes as these nice little box graphics. But behind the scenes in Notion's code, a checked checkbox is actually written as true, so just the word true, and an unchecked checkbox is written as the word false. So if we actually ask it to simply format these checkboxes as text, it's going to display them as text rather than these fancy checkbox graphics, which is actually going to make it easier for us to work with them within our formula. So that's what we're going to start by doing. So the first thing I need to do is grab our checkboxes. So we've already pulled them through into this formula property here. So I can simply grab them just by pulling through the checkboxes property here. And I've now added that into the formula. Next, we're going to once again use our .map function so that we can actually just access the data inside of here. And we're now going to tell it to format these checkboxes as text rather than as the checkbox graphics. So to do that, we can simply just write the words format, open parentheses, and we're going to type current in here, which is going to tell it to grab the current data within this property. And I'm just going to close 2 parentheses. So I've got 1 to close off this format and 1 to close off this map function. So that is the first thing that we're going to do. So if at this point I click done, as you can see, it's now showing this list of true, true, false, true, true. And like I said earlier, a checked checkbox will return true and an unchecked checkbox will return false. So as you can see, it's true, true, false, true, true. So that's great. That's what we currently have. And next, what we want to do is we actually want to count the total number of characters in this list. So we would count every single letter and each comma, but not the spaces. So as you can see, the first word is true. So true is 4 letters. So that would be 4 plus the comma would be 5. There'd be another 5 for this true. False would be 6 because there's 5 letters in the word false, and there's also a comma which would make it 6. So what we're going to do is just count every single character in this list. Now I know that might seem a little bit random, but don't worry, it's going to make sense as we get further along into the rest of the formula. Now there isn't one easy function that is just going to count all of the characters, so we do have to do a little bit of a workaround. So the first thing we can do is just count the number of letters in each word. Now if you place your cursor here just before the final parentheses and type in dot length like this and open and close a parentheses, that is now implementing the length function that is going to count the number of letters in each word. So if I just click done at this point, so now as you can see it's showing the number of letters in the word rather than the word itself. So 4 refers to true because there's 4 letters in true, and the 5 here refers to false because of this unchecked checkbox, and there are 5 letters in the word false. Now next let's simply add all of these numbers together so that we get the total number of letters. So if I just go back into my formula, right at the end here I'm just going to type dot sum, open and close a parentheses like this. So as you can see, the sum function returns the sum of its arguments, so that just means it's going to add all of these numbers here together. So if I click done, as you can see it's now added together all of those numbers. Now as I said earlier, we also wanted to include the number of commas that were in that list as well, but currently this number here only accounts for the letters and not the commas in the list. So to add in the commas, we could simply just add one for each of the checkboxes because there was a comma after each item in the list, apart from the last one, but we'll account for that in a minute. So firstly, let's just go back into our formula. So we're just going to add a plus symbol here. So we're simply just going to add something to this number. And firstly, we're going to grab this checkboxes property again, which if you remember is just going to pull through the checkboxes here. And we're just going to type the dot length function. Now, when you apply the length function to this checkboxes property, it's simply just going to count the number of checkboxes. So there are 5 checkboxes, so it's simply going to add 5 to this number. So 21 add 5 should be 26. So let's click done to see 26. So we've now added the number of checkboxes to this number, so that is accounting for the commas. But if you remember, the last item in the list didn't have a comma because it's right at the end. So we do just need to minus 1 from the end of this list just to account for that. So if I just go back into the formula, I'm simply just going to type -1 to account for the extra comma that we've added by using this formula. So if I do that, it's going to -1 and we're now on 25. So there we have it. This formula is counting the total number of characters in our list. Now, as I said, I know this doesn't really make much sense now on why we're doing this, but it will later on, I promise. Now, we are going to actually reference this piece of code a lot later, so I think it would be useful if we could just turn this into a variable so that essentially I'm just going to give this long piece of code a phrase, a little code name, and every time I mention that code name, Notion will know that I mean this piece of code, so it just saves me from typing it out every single time. And to turn this into a variable, we can use the let function. Now, I'm actually going to use lets with an S like this, open parentheses. And the reason it's lets rather than let is because lets allows you to create multiple different variables. Now we are going to create another similar variable in a second, so that's why I want to use let so that we can create multiple. So let me just do shift and enter to put this onto the next line so there's just a little bit more space. And the first thing I need to do is give this a name. So let's just call this one total characters, and you just need to separate that with a comma. And I'm also just going to isolate this entire piece of code here in some parentheses so that it doesn't get mixed up. So if I put 1 at the start and just 1 at the end and just another comma as well. And with our let's formula, we also need to close that off. So I'm just going to hit shift and enter, and I'm just going to put a close parentheses here so that this function has been closed off. Okay, so now that we have this variable, later on, if I mention this total characters phrase here, it will simply just pull through all of this code. So I just don't need to type that out every time, which is going to save me a lot of time and effort. Now, the next step in this streak formula is going to be counting how many characters there are in our list before the current streak begins. So our current streak begins when we start getting true in a row without any breaks. We want to now count the characters up until that point, and after we've done that, we can minus our 2 numbers to work out the difference. So I'm going to start by placing my cursor here, shift and enter to go to our next line. So we're going to add that as another variable because again, I'm going to be referencing it a lot later on. So just under here, we're going to add our second variable. So that's where we just use this code name to refer to a piece of code. So let's just call this one before streak like this because it's going to be the characters that are before our streak, and we're going to do a comma. So we're going to start by typing map and open a parentheses, and inside our map, which if you remember just allows us to grab data from other areas, is we're going to place our checkbox property, which is this formula here that just brings up our checkboxes from our habit tracker. So we're going to click on the checkboxes formula, and that's going to be placed inside of our map function. We then want to add a comma, and we actually want to just format the checkboxes in that list. So we want to format it as text, so it just says true, true, false, true, true. So to do that, I can simply just type format, and inside two parentheses like this, I'm going to type the word current, which is just going to grab the current data that we have inside our checkboxes. And I just need to add another parentheses here at the end. Next, what we want to do is we actually want to remove the current streak from the list so that we can just count the characters up until that point. So the current streak is going to be the list of trues in a row at the end, and I therefore want to remove those trues and just count the characters up until that point. And we can actually use the replace all function to do that, and we're simply going to replace all of the trues at the end with absolutely nothing, so essentially we're just deleting them. So to do that, right at the start, just before map, I'm going to type replace all and open parentheses. So therefore we are applying the replace all function to this entire piece of code. I'm just going to close that off at the end with another parentheses. And just before our final parentheses here, this is where we're actually going to give it some instructions. So let me just show you the replace all information here. So this is what Notion says about replace all. So it replaces all matches of the regular expression with the replacement value. So as you can see here in this example, we're doing replace all. So this here is the expression, which is essentially the data that we're working with. So you might have the phrase Notion, Notion. You're then going to tell it what you want it to match. So therefore, if you ever see an N, so as you can see, there are two N's, this is what you want to replace it with. We want to replace it with an M. So as you can see here, Notion, Notion, we look for N's, we replace them with M's, and that becomes motion, motion. So that's essentially what we're going to do. We've already inputted what we want it to apply this to. So instead of Notion, Notion, we want it to apply it to our list of checkboxes that are written as true, true, false, true, true. And now we're going to tell it what we want it to search for in that list, and then we can tell it what we want it to replace it with. So firstly, we want it to grab the trues at the end of the list and replace them with nothing. So let's start by telling it that we want it to grab the trues at the end of the list. So just here before our final parentheses, we're going to type two quotation marks, and inside I'm going to open a parentheses and write true with a comma. And we're going to close the parentheses. So this is looking for the true in the list followed by a comma. But remember that the true at the end of the list doesn't have a comma because it's at the end of the list, so there is no comma following it. So we're going to add a plus symbol and open parentheses again. We're going to write true without a comma this time, close the parentheses, and we also just need to add a $sign like this. Now this might look a little bit confusing, but I'll try and break down exactly what this little piece of text here is searching for. So this piece of text that we've just added in is specifically searching for the consecutive trues at the end of the list. So this first bit here is looking for any trues that are followed by a comma. The plus symbol in the middle is specifying that we should look for one or more of these elements. So for example, if there were three of these in a row, so it said true, comma, true, comma, true, therefore it would be able to pick up that there are three of them because the plus symbol indicates that there might be more than one, and it would pick that up. And then we've got true with a $sign. Now the dollar symbol is indicating in this case that this is the end of a row. So this piece of code is specifically searching for the final true at the end of the row. So therefore we know that we're only looking for trues right at the end and not somewhere in the middle, because that would indicate a broken streak. Next, we just want to add a comma, and I'm just going to add two quotation marks like this. Now this, if you remember, is what we put at the end with what do we want to replace these trues with. And in this case, I actually just want to delete them. So if I replace them with nothing, if I don't place anything inside these commas, it will simply just remove these and not replace them with anything, which is what we want. Now, one other thing I just want to do at this point is I just want to actually isolate this piece so we don't get lost. So we want to isolate this inside parentheses so it doesn't get mixed up with whatever we follow it with. So I'm just going to add one parentheses at the start and then just one more at the end. Okay, and I think I just missed a comma out here. And you also need to make sure you've got a comma here at the end. And at this point, I just want to call our before streak variable here just to show you what this piece of code here looks like. So I can do that just on the next line if I just type in before streak. So I'm essentially just calling this piece of code so we can see what it currently looks like. So I'm just going to hit done. And as you can see, we now have our list of true, true, false, but the final two consecutive trues, which indicates our streak in this case, have been removed, and that's because of the replace all function. So now what I want to do is simply just count the number of characters that we have here, so including the letters and the commas, and afterwards we're going to minus that from the total characters that we worked out earlier, and that's going to help us work out our streak. Okay, so I'm just going to remove this little before streak bit here because we don't actually need to call that. I just wanted to show you what it looks like in the box. And to count how many characters we have, we actually are going to use that dot length function again. So we're going to add it at the start here. So just after this parentheses here, I'm going to type length, open a parentheses, and I'm going to add one more to close it at the end here like this. And just to show you how that works, I'm just going to again call before streak here. And let's click done, and instead of this it's going to display the number of characters. So let me just do it. So there we go. So we have 16 characters. Now the only problem is that normally a list of checkboxes wouldn't end with a comma. In this case it did end with a comma because we'd cut it off halfway through. Normally the final item in the list would not have a comma, and because we've manually removed the trues from the end of the list, there was a comma present at the end, and that has been counted in our character list here. But we actually don't want that. It will mess with the formula later, so we do need to remove it. So let's just open back up our formula, and we're just going to minus 1 from the final number to account for this. So I'm simply going to add that in here just before this final parentheses. I'm just going to type in -1, and if I click done, as you can see, it's just removed 1, so it's just removed that final comma that should not have been there. Okay, so finally we are getting close to the streak now, I promise. Now the next thing we want to do is actually just work out the difference between the total characters and the characters before our streak. So let me just remove this because again I just put that in there to show you how it works. So if you remember, the total characters number here is working out the total number of characters in our list, whereas the before streak number is working out the total number of characters before our streak begins. So therefore, if we minus these two numbers, this will work out the number of characters within our streak. So what we're going to do is we're simply going to call total characters. So I'm going to type in total characters. We're going to minus the before streak number, which was the characters before the streak. So it's just going to do this number minus this one. So if I just click done at this point, it's now given us 10, which sounds about right to me. Now, if you remember in our original list, whenever true shows up, it would be 5 characters. So there's 4 letters in the word true plus the 1 comma. So therefore, if we divide this number here by 5 for the 5 characters in true and the comma, it would therefore show us how many trues we had in a row. So let me just click again on this formula, and I'm just going to isolate this so we don't mess with the initial calculations. So I'm just going to add 2 parentheses like this, one at the start, one at the end, and I'm simply just going to divide it by 5 by using the / for divide. So if I then click done, so finally this number is actually showing us our current streak. So if I just click the X at this point, if I then just check this checkbox as well, as you can see it's displaying 5. If I remove one here, it's now displaying 4, and this is accurate. This is our current streak. If I break one here in the middle, as you can see it's only counting the 2 checkboxes and discounts this one, so it is working correctly. Let's just go back onto our streak formula. Now we can also add a little bit of fancy formatting so that it will display with a fire emoji next to it, similar to other streak apps like Duolingo. So just here I'm going to add a plus symbol, 2 quotation marks, and inside here you can actually add in the fire emoji. So I'm just going to grab my emoji editor. So let's use the fire emoji, and you also just want to add in a space in between these quotation marks as well, so that it does show up with a space in between them. So if I just click done at this point, as you can see it now shows 2 with a little fire emoji next to it. I also think it would be nice if the text was bold, just because it makes it stand out just a little bit more. So right at the end here, after our final parentheses, we're going to use the style function, which allows us to add styling to our text. So just here I'm going to type .style, open and close parentheses, and inside we're going to put 2 quotation marks and a B. And if you look here, it says that the style function will add styles and colors to the text, and one of the options here is the B, which stands for bold. So doing that is just going to bold the text. So if I just click done, it's just bolding the text. It's a small change, but it does make a little bit of a difference. So this now displays your streak. So as I said, if I check this off, it displays the streak. Now the only problem that we are going to fix is that if there is only one checkbox checked, it will display the number 0.2. So let me just show you what I mean. So it works fine until you get to one checkbox, and then it displays 0.2, and that's just due to the math inside the formula that we have going on. But we can easily fix this. Now the reason it displays as 0.2 is because if you look at this piece of text here, we're doing the total characters minus the characters before our our streak. And when there is only one checkbox checked, the difference between these two numbers is 1. So we're then doing 1 divided by 5, which is 0.2. Now our formula works, as I said, for all other outputs except for this one. So let's code something in for this outcome, and we can actually use the if function to do that. So we can essentially just say, if only one checkbox is checked, then let's do this instead of displaying 0.2. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to place my cursor here, shift and enter so we get onto a new line, and I'm going to type if for our if function, open a parentheses, and what we're going to do is we're firstly going to input our total characters variable. So you can type it out or you can actually just select it here. So we're going to add total characters. Now if the total characters minus 1 is equal to, so you need 2 equal signs in Notion for is equal to, and then we're going to input our before streak variable. So if the total characters minus 1 is equal to the characters before the streak, so therefore if they are equal essentially, and I am just going to isolate this little equation here inside parentheses so it's not messed with, so I'm going to place 1 extra parentheses here and then 1 more here at the end, and now we need to tell it what we want it to display if this is true. So this is, as I said, just checking for if it's going to equal 0.2. So I'm going to type a comma, and we're simply just going to format open and close parentheses, and I'm just going to put a dash like this. So if it's equal to 1, it's just going to show a dash. So therefore, if there is no current streak, it's just going to show a dash. So if one checkbox is checked, there isn't a current streak, there's just one, so it's a dash. If none are checked, it will also show the dash. And you just want to add a comma here as well. And I just forgot here, I do need to place this inside quotation marks. So it's the dash inside the quotation marks. And I think I'm missing one final parentheses here to close off our if function. So if I just close that off there, and I think that is our formula. So let's click done. So as you can see, it's now showing a dash when we have just one checkbox checked. If I have no checkboxes checked, it shows a dash. But if I then have 2, it starts showing our streak. And as I check more, it's showing our current streak. So it is now working correctly. Now, if you want, you don't have to have the dash. So if we just go back to the formula, you can replace this dash here with any emoji. If there's any other emoji you think would work better or you'd prefer to have, then just replace this dash here with a different emoji. But in this example, I'm just going to leave it as the dash. So now that we have the habit tracker with the streak tracker all set up, I am just going to make this look a little bit better, and we're also just going to add a few more habits so I can show you how it would look if you had multiple different habits being tracked at the same time. So I'm going to start by adding a couple more habits. So you want to add your habits up here into the habits database. So I'm going to click on plus new, and let's say another habit I want to track is a yoga session, and I'll just add one more. So you'll start by just adding all of the habits you want to track up here. And I'm just going to add some example data as well. So I'm going to add an entry for each of these days for each of these habits. Okay, so in our habit tracker database down here, I've just added an entry for each of our different habits for each of the different days that I'm currently tracking. Now, don't worry, you won't have to do this every day. I'm going to show you how to automate this in just a second, but I firstly just want to show you how it works. So one thing you'll need to ensure is that each entry in the habit tracker is related to the correct habit up here in the habits database. So we did that earlier with this drink water habit. So on this one for our yoga session, I'm going to click on here. It's going to bring up the habits up here in the habit tracker, and I'm going to select yoga session for this one, and I'll just drag that to all of the ones that are yoga session, and I'll just do the same with this one for the other habit. Okay, so this is now what it looks like. One other thing that I just want to note is that you do need to have the dates in the correct order for the streak to work. So you want to start with the earliest date, and as you add further entries, the dates will increase, which you should be doing anyway, but I just wanted to point that out. If you add them in the wrong way around, it won't work correctly. And let's just check off a few of these checkboxes so that I can show you how the streak tracker works. Okay, so let's make this look a little bit better, and then I'll show you how to automate the habit tracker. So firstly, up here in our habits database, I want to change this into a gallery view. So I'm going to click on the 3 dots here, select layout, and we're going to change it to a gallery. Now, firstly, I'm going to get rid of all this blank space here. If you did want to add a cover photo for each habit, then feel free. You can just add that on the page for the habit, and you can set the card preview to page cover. But I'm actually going to set it to none so that it gets rid of all that blank space. And we're just going to click back and select properties, and we want to show our streak formula on the card. So I'm just going to click the little symbol here to make it show on the card, which then will look like this. I'm also just going to hide this database title, and feel free to add an icon for each of the different habits that you're tracking. So if you just click on here, it will open up the page and I can just click add icon, and I'm going to use Notion's icon library, and this one's drink water. So let's just add a water drop. And as I said, if you wanted to add the cover photo, you can click here and add that. But I'm just going to leave that blank for now. So that icon will then show up on our card. So I'll just add one for each of our different habits. You can also change the name of this tab as well. So I'm going to click on here, rename it, and let's just call it Habit Streaks. And I'll change the icon as well. Let's change it to a fire icon like this. So this is the actual streak tracker. So as you can see, if I start checking off more of these checkboxes, the streak will increase. Now on our habit tracker, firstly, I want to show you how to set up the calendar view because it's quite a nice way to view the information. So you can do that simply by clicking on the three dots here, select layout, and we're going to go with calendar. Now I am just going to make this page full width for a second because the calendar is kind of squished like this. So if you just click on the three dots up here, you can set it to full width, which just gives you a bit more space, so it's easier just to see all the information. I do also want to see the checkbox property on the card, so I can simply just check it off straight from the calendar. So if we just go up here and click the three dots and select properties, I'm going to show this done checkbox, which will then look like this. So every day I can simply come to the calendar, look at the current date, and then either check or not check the habits for the ones that I've done. Next, I want to set up some recurring templates so that I don't actually have to manually add each entry every single day. It will automatically pop up on the card for me on the day, and I can then just check it off as I go. So to do that, what we're going to do is just up here, you're going to click on the down arrow next to the new button and click on new template, and you're going to have to do one of these for each of the different habits. So we'll start with drink water, so I'm just going to label it like this. On the date property, you want to click on here and select today. So therefore, whenever this template is regenerated, we're going to set it to regenerate automatically every single day. It's automatically going to pull through the current date in this date property, and you also need to make sure that you relate it to the correct habit in our streak database, otherwise it's not going to count towards your streak. So if you click on here, just select the appropriate habit. So this one obviously is drink water, and you can also add an icon if you want as well. I'm just going to add the same icon to match the habit. So let's go with the water droplet, and I'm just going to click back. Now, if we then click again on the down arrow, here is the template that we've just set up. So I'm going to click on the three dots and we're going to set it to repeat, and I'm going to repeat daily. That will then bring up this, so you can leave it as it is. It's going to repeat every single day, and it's going to generate at midnight. You can change the timings if you prefer, but I think midnight is fine. And I'm going to click save. So now essentially what is going to happen at midnight tonight on the 28th, it's just going to generate this little drink water card on here automatically for me so that I don't have to do it myself. So as I said, you will need to do one of these for all of the different habits. So I'm just going to once again click on the arrow, add another template, and this one's going to be yoga session. I'm just going to follow the exact same process, add today as the date, and just relate it to the correct habit. And don't forget to set each one as a repeat. So once you've set them all as recurring, they should show this little arrow next to it. So that shows that you've successfully set that up. I'm also just going to hide this little title here. The final thing that I want to do is set up a today tab so that you can easily just see the habits that you have coming up today. So what we're going to do is just click on the plus symbol here, and I'm going to add a gallery view. Firstly, once again, I don't want to see all this blank space. So I'm going to click on card preview, set it to none. And we're also just going to name this view today. And I'm going to click on here to choose an icon. Let's just go with a calendar icon. So this is what that looks like. Again, I'm just going to hide the title, and then I also actually just want to see the checkbox on here so that I can check it off. So we're going to click on here, select properties, and we want to show the checkbox on here. And the final thing I need to do is just set a filter. So this is currently bringing up all of the different checkboxes for every single day. So if we add a filter, we're going to filter by the date, and we only want to see habits where it is today. So if I change this to this day, that essentially just means today. And as you can see, it's now just bringing up today's habit. So this will refresh every single day. So you don't need to update this. If you just come to the today tab every day, it will show your habits. You can check them off and watch as your streak increases. So let me just uncheck them. So every day you'll come to your habit tracker, and this is what it will look like. It will show the dash because your streak is currently broken. But as you check the checkbox, it will then update the streak with the current streak number. And that's it. That is a habit tracker with streaks in Notion. You can check out all of my pre-made Notion templates over on my store, including this super advanced second brain system. I'll leave a link in the description box below. And if you did find this video useful, then I'd really appreciate if you could give the video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel as I post new Notion tutorials every week.